Welcome to the Mixed Race Belonging podcast, where we explore the intersection of mixed identity and belonging through the lens of somatics and personal and collective liberation to help you heal your belonging wounds and build relationships where you can show up as your full-ass self. I'm your host, Raina LaGrand, an embodiment coach for mixed race people with a background as a trauma therapist, yoga teacher, and health educator. The tools and insights I share with you here are the approach that has not only helped me heal my belonging wound, but also helped me help my mixed race clients do the same. We all need something good to belong to right now. Relationships and spaces where we feel safe, held, seen, heard, and dignified. Thanks for being here, and let's get started with today's show. Welcome to the first episode of the Mixed Race Belonging podcast. I'm Raina, your host, and I'm super excited to be here today. So I thought, given that this is the first podcast episode, I would share just a little bit about me and my background, and then I really want to orient us in the purpose of this podcast, which is really around healing the mixed race belonging wound, tending to the mixed race belonging wound. And you might be like, what the heck is that? I'm going to break it down for you when we get further into the episode. But like I said, I just want to start with a little orienting around who I am. So my day job is that I'm a trauma therapist. I've been a therapist for almost a decade now, and I work from a somatic, body-based orientation, and I primarily support people with complex trauma, relational trauma, racialized trauma. And when I was first becoming a therapist, naturally I was working with a lot of BIPOC clients, and I was especially attracting a lot of mixed race clients because I was mixed race, and they were like, hey, I want to work with somebody who looks like me or has my experiences or understands me, or someone I don't have to justify myself to. And so I was attracting all these mixed race clients, and I was noticing that they were all having similar thoughts and feelings, and they had similar experiences around feeling like they didn't belong anywhere, really questioning who they were. There was just a lot of insecurity, and that would often lead to a lot of people pleasing and self-abandonment kind of behaviors. And the thing was, they thought it was just them. They were all isolated in this experience of being multiracial. And so they thought, well, it's just me, and so it must truly be something about me. And so I really started to realize that there needed to be more resources for mixed race people, especially for mixed race people to connect. And there are a ton of resources out there, but I would argue that there needs to be even more because we are a large and growing and diverse population. And so over the years, I started curating offerings for mixed race people, first in my therapy practice, and now my therapy practice continues to exist as Root to Rise Somatics, but I also own this coaching practice, Mixed Race Belonging. And so I've, over the years, started to offer one-on-one coaching and a group course and other spaces for mixed race people to connect. And especially, during the summer of 2020, following the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and so many others, there was so much uprising happening in response to racism in the United States. And, suddenly there were all these opportunities for people to connect in affinity groups, to sort of do the work with other people who were like them. So there was, spaces for Black people to process what was happening, spaces for white folks, spaces for Asian folks. There was a lot of anti-Asian racism happening during the early days of the COVID pandemic. So there were all these awesome affinity spaces being held, and I would recommend them to my clients, but a lot of them would be like, well, which one do I go to? Like if there was like a black, a white, and a POC affinity group, for instance, which one do I pick? Are people going to be okay with me being there? Am I going to make people uncomfortable? So again, like just there was this need for specific support for mixed race people where we don't have to feel like, we have to like monitor ourselves in those groups. Even though I work with a lot of my clients on building up the confidence to enter those spaces unapologetically, we also needed spaces just for us. So that's kind of how I got here. And because of the kind of work that I do, I am so acutely aware of the fact that most of the trauma that we endure is either in relationship, it's perpetrated by people who often we know and feel that we should feel safe around, and or the trauma happens in a way where we feel so alone and isolated in our experience. So in many ways, trauma is always, always, always relational. And there's a lot more that I could say there. So, I have always operated from a relational framework, which is, part of the reason why mixed race belonging exists. It's not just about working on our identities, but working on our relationships and our sense of belonging. And so much research points to the fact that relationships are really the most significant factor in our well-being. The US Surgeon General in the previous administration, I should say, released a report on what they call the loneliness epidemic. And they shared research around the fact that loneliness and isolation is really more harmful to us than a lot of like the health behaviors that we often are told to do or not do. For instance, they said that, being isolated is actually more harmful for our health than smoking cigarettes, right? So relationships are healing, and that's why I do this work. And relationships are the place that we need to experience that healing. We need to be able to have relational experiences that rewrite the sort of script that we're either carrying in our minds or in our bodies around the fact that relationships aren't safe or we don't belong. So that is why I do this work. And over the course of all this like exploration and kind of like insight gathering process that I've gone through over the last few years, I have developed this concept of the mixed race belonging wound. Now, what I want to say with a caveat, because I really like to make sure that everybody gets credit for their ideas, is that I coined the term the belonging wound, and Googled all over Google, scoured Google for, to see, has anybody else talking about this? And so I really thought I had coined the term. However, there's a therapist who wrote a book called The Origins of You, Vienna Ferrone. I hope I'm saying her name right. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. And in that book, she talks about different wounds, such as the belonging wound, the trust wound, and other things. So I just want to give her credit that actually she had also coined that term. So for me, I really want to focus on like this belonging wound has to do with being mixed race that I'm going to talk to you about today. So it's the mixed race belonging wound. What is the mixed race belonging wound? The belonging wound for mixed race people is really the impact of all of the othering and the microaggressions and the rejection that we have experienced as a result of being multiracial and not fitting in discrete racial categories. So there's a term called monoracism, and it's eluding me right now who coined that term, but I'll put it in the show notes if I find it, but a researcher coined that term, monoracism, to describe the unique ways that mixed race people experience racism, right? That we don't just experience the racism of you're black, so you must be a criminal, or you're Asian, so you must be fresh off the boat, but we also experience racism from all kinds of monoracial people and also all other mixed race people. That has to do with this sort of either forcing us or marginalizing us because we don't fit into distinct racial categories. So the belonging wound is the impact on our minds and bodies as a result of that monoracism experience that we have had our entire lives and continue to have. And it's can look a lot of different ways, right? It can look like not feeling like enough of something to claim it, right? Feeling like, oh, I'm only half this, so I can't actually own my blackness because my dad is black, but I'm just half black, right? It can look like feeling extremely sensitive to rejection to the point of avoiding it at all costs. It can look like not putting yourself out there to make friends, or putting yourself out there and retreating as soon as something feels uncomfortable. As soon as you smell like I might be rejected, you retreat, right? It can look like shape shifting in order to meet other people's expectations of not even just your identity, but your personality, people pleasing, ruminating about past interactions with other people, perpetually waiting for somebody to rescue you or tell you that you belong, instead of feeling like I have agency in my life to put myself in the places and spaces I want to be. It can look like avoiding vulnerability and struggling to develop deeper connections with others because maybe if they really see who you are, they won't like you. Maybe they'll see you as too privileged or not woke enough, right? So there's so many different ways that the belonging wound manifests. And I often think of it as like there are different parts of us. I'm a therapist, so I use parts work or internal family systems therapy if you're familiar with that. There are different parts of us who are protectors. There are these protectors who take the lead in our relational experiences as a way to either get us the connection that we're longing for or protect us from experiencing the harm and the pain of being rejected, right? And these protectors, they usually fall on one end of the spectrum or another, or often people will feel like they kind of toggle between the two. So on one end of the spectrum is the type of protector that is hyper independent, hyper autonomous, and really distances from relationships. And this is the kind of protector who is protecting us from that harmful experience of feeling rejected, othered, misunderstood, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, there is the kind of protector who is so fixated on connection that they become sort of enmeshed with other people and lose their sense of self. So they're constantly reaching, grasping for connection to the point of like abandoning their own needs, right? And the reality is that these protectors come from somewhere. I don't want to gaslight you that these protectors don't have a purpose or that you are just being sensitive or need to get over it. These protectors come from somewhere. And when people work with me in one-on-one therapy or one-on-one coaching, we do a lot of work to just witness and hold space for these parts, not trying to convince them that things have to be a different way. Because often when we validate these parts, they feel like they don't have to be so loud and we can kind of soften. But we also don't want to lose these parts. Like you want to maintain the ability to notice when you need to distance yourself from a relationship or when you want to reach out and try to get closer to someone else. So these aren't bad parts at all. They are good. They are adaptive. They are doing really important things for your body and your mind. And because this wound is really like a racialized and relational trauma experience, the trauma of it makes it feel so big. It makes it feel so big that there's something about us, right? That I can't experience the kind of relationships I want, or I have to overextend in order to get connection, right? There's this bigness that kind of puts us in this black and white thinking of I'm always microaggressed, or I never belong, or I'm never going to have what I want, right? And so sort of tending to that belonging wound, coming into relationship with those protectors, we are really allowing them to be seen so that we can also open up to other experiences in relationships. We can be attuned to relationships where we can show up as our full self, where our autonomy is respected, where our desire for closeness is really respected and dignified, right? And really, like, when we invite these parts of us to be seen in this way, to be witnessed, we are also allowing grief to come to the surface. We are allowing the grief that we have carried our entire lives around being mixed and feeling marginalized in others to come to the surface. Because these parts, whether they are more distancers or more sort of like graspy, like enmeshed parts, they are often protecting us from feeling the grief under the surface. They're protecting us because it feels like to feel that grief would be so unbearable, because nobody's ever sat with us in that grief before. In fact, our grief has been dismissed and minimized. But when you work with me, you have a dedicated space to talk to someone who also knows what it's like to live between cultures. You never have to over explain yourself with me, right? So we allow that grief to come up. And I think of it sometimes like the protectors are treading water. They're like, ooh, I don't want to like settle and float in this experience because I might drown. But actually what happens is often when we settle into the grief, our perspective expands. It's not like, ooh, I'm feeling the grief and that's the only thing I'm feeling. And see, I told you I don't belong anywhere. I'm never going to have the relationships I want. It's actually, oh, I've been trying so hard in this way with these people to get, what I want, or to sort of create a different experience than I've had, that I've actually missed out on all these other opportunities for belonging, for feeling secure in who I was, right? Whether that means that there are other relationships right in front of you, or other opportunities to find relationships that would really feel like the most, safe, empowering relationships with you. Or if it's like, wow, I felt like I couldn't set a boundary with this person because what if they abandon me? But actually, I can. Like sometimes it prevents us from allowing the people in our life to show us that they are going to stick with us through however we show up, whatever we need, whatever we express, right? So we get to have a different experience when we witness these parts and when we drop into grief, and then we expand into also like the joy of connection, the joy of being our full self, the ease of not having to pretend or be hyper vigilant or constantly be in protection mode. And the truth is, healthy relationships require a good balance of autonomy and connection. We need both. So, whatever end of the spectrum you lie on, you already have half of the puzzle, half of the pie, or whatever metaphor you want to use. You already have half of it, right? Now we just need to like create space for the other part of it, right? So that is the mixed race belonging wound. And that is just a little taste of like how I work with people to tend to that wound so that you can have a different experience and you can have the belonging, the community, the relationships that you have dreamed of since you were a little kid. I know when I was a little kid, I felt so alone, so misunderstood that I was constantly fantasizing about the life that I would have someday. And I thought I was going to be a California girl out in California, just getting my beach on, being a celebrity or something. That fantasy didn't play out, but I'm here to tell you that a little girl who was in therapy forever, and I found actually worksheets from when I was in therapy in high school where I felt so deeply that I didn't belong, that I wasn't lovable, that I wasn't likable. I am here to tell you I have a different experience now. I feel so deeply connected to myself. I have an amazing group of friends, and I feel very confident and hopeful about like what else is possible in life. Even though there's still grief, there's still hard times, I still feel lonely sometimes, but I have healed. I am healing. I don't think we're ever done healing. And that is possible for you too. So, in the next episode, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how a somatic body based approach will really help you to heal your mixed race belonging wound. And I can't wait to share that with you. So, make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss that episode when it comes out.